Winter didn't just take food from ancient people. Sometimes it took the people who ate the least and gave the most. That first sentence sounds cold. It was meant to be, because deep winter for most of human history wasn't a season you decorated a tree for. It was a math problem. A brutal one run every single year with no calculator and no room for error. And the answer to that math problem sometimes meant choices no modern person wants to picture, made by people who had no other option on the table. Let's set the scene first. Go back tens of thousands of years to Ice Age Europe, or to the Arctic communities that lived off frozen coastlines for generation after generation. There's no grocery store 2 minutes down the road, no stored grain harvest waiting in a barn, no freezer stocked in October. Food is whatever you killed, trapped, or gathered in the short, warm months, and it has to last through a cold season that can stretch 6, 7, 8 months long. Every single body in the group burns more calories just staying warm, even lying still in a shelter. A hunter walking through deep snow to check a trap line burns almost twice what he'd burn crossing the same ground in summer. Add short daylight hours, animals that scatter or hibernate, and storms that can trap a whole camp indoors for days, and you get one question repeated every single winter. Do we have enough for everyone to make it to spring? Sometimes the answer was yes, often it wasn't. And when it wasn't, ancient communities didn't just wait around and hope. They had systems. Some of those systems were clever. Some of them are hard to hear about today. The first survival trick sounds almost too simple to count as dark, until you learn what happens without it. Ancient hunters in cold climates didn't just eat meat. They obsessed over fat, tracked it, fought over it, and built entire hunting strategies around finding it. Lean meat on its own can actually kill you. It's called rabbit starvation, a term the Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson coined after spending years living among northern hunting communities and watching what happened to people who ran low on fat during a hard season. If a body runs almost entirely on lean protein, with no fat and no carbohydrate to balance it out, the body can't process it fast enough. Nausea sets in first, then diarrhea. Then over a few weeks, the body simply gives out, starving on a full stomach of meat. So ancient hunters cracked open bones for marrow instead of tossing them aside. They saved organ fat before muscle meat, and prized fatty animals like seal or caribou in autumn far above leaner catches like rabbit or late-season deer, even when the leaner prey was easier to find and easier to kill. Fat wasn't a treat to ancient people. It was the actual difference between living through February and not. A community that misjudged its fat stores could hunt successfully all winter, eat regularly, and still starve to death on a diet that looked, on paper, like plenty of food. Now here's where it gets darker. In a cave in southwest England called Gough's Cave, researchers have found human bones dated to roughly 14,700 years ago, showing unmistakable signs of defleshing, marrow extraction, and chewing marks left by human teeth. A few skulls from the site were carefully shaped into cups. For a long time, the obvious guess was starvation cannibalism, desperate people eating their own dead to survive a brutal winter with nothing else left. But careful study of the bones tells a stranger story than that. The cuts and the care taken with the remains, including the shaping of the skull cups, look more ritual than random and desperate. Researchers now think this was likely a funeral practice, a deliberate way of handling the dead that happened to involve eating them, not a last resort born of empty stomachs and a failed hunt. It's a case where the honest answer isn't the neat, dramatic one people expect. Cannibalism did happen in Ice Age Europe more than once at more than one site. Why it happened, whether from hunger, ritual, or both at different times, is still debated among archaeologists, and it will probably stay debated for a long time. The next practice is the one people find hardest to sit with, and it comes from records of Arctic communities, especially groups like the Netsilik Inuit, documented by explorers and anthropologists in the 19th and early 20th centuries. During long winter treks between hunting grounds, when food ran critically short and every extra mouth mattered, elderly members who could no longer keep pace were sometimes left behind. One Netsilik man told the anthropologist Knud Rasmussen in the 1920s that it was custom for old people who could do no more to help death take them. That's not a line about cruelty. It's a line about arithmetic, spoken calmly by someone who expected to say the same words about himself one day when his own turn came. The popular image of frail elders shipped off alone on floating ice is mostly myth. Historians who studied this closely found no solid evidence that anyone was set adrift on an ice floe in the way pop culture describes it. What actually happened was quieter and just as final. An elder might be left behind in a shelter with no supplies, while the rest of the group moved on overnight, or left in the open during a storm. A person past hunting age might ask a relative to end their life quickly, because in the belief system of some of these communities, an assisted death led to a better afterlife than dying slowly from exposure or hunger. This wasn't common in good years, and it wasn't treated lightly. Records consistently show it only appeared during real famine, when keeping every single mouth fed threatened the survival of the whole group instead of just one person. In ordinary seasons with normal hunting, the elderly were fed like everyone else, and valued for decades of accumulated knowledge about ice conditions, weather patterns, and animal behavior that younger hunters simply hadn't earned yet. The same brutal math occasionally touched the youngest members of these communities too. In some Arctic groups, spacing between births during repeated famine years meant a newborn sometimes wasn't raised, a pattern recorded by multiple ethnographers working across different Inuit and Yupik communities during the same period. This wasn't universal, and it wasn't casual or common. It was rare, treated as a last option after every other one had failed, and it tracked directly with how bad the hunting season had actually been. A community with full meat caches heading into winter almost never faced this choice at all. A community 2 failed hunts away from spring, with children already thin and old stores already gone, sometimes did. Rationing itself was often a formal, almost legal process, not a casual guess. Some Arctic and subarctic communities kept detailed mental accounts of exactly how much dried meat, fat, or fish each family had stored before the first heavy snow, and camp leaders adjusted hunting routes and travel plans around those numbers. Meat was often cached frozen in the ground or under stone, hidden from scavenging animals and marked, so it could be found again under snow cover months later. Fish and meat were dried, smoked, or frozen solid specifically to slow spoilage through a season, with no other way to keep food safe. None of this guaranteed survival, but it stretched a good autumn hunt across a season that could otherwise run out weeks too early, and it gave a group real information about how close to the edge they actually were before winter even started. Shelter and warmth carried their own quiet strategies too, and these ones are easier to sit with. Groups slept packed close together on purpose, bodies stacked for shared heat inside small, low, well-insulated spaces built to trap warmth rather than waste it on a room too big to heat. Animal skins weren't just clothing, they were engineered layers, with fur turned inward or outward depending on the weather, and seams sealed with sinew to keep wind from finding a way through. Fires were managed with real precision, banked low overnight to save fuel and built up fast at dawn, because a family that burned through its wood or fat lamp oil by January had no way to replace it until spring thaw opened up the land again. Here's the part worth sitting with. None of this was chaos. It wasn't a group of people losing their minds because winter got hard. Every one of these practices followed rules, customs, and social expectations, worked out over generations of trial and error in some of the harshest environments humans have ever managed to live in. Fat rationing followed careful, learned knowledge about which animals to hunt and which parts of them to prize above the rest. Cannibalism, where it happened, followed cultural and possibly religious structure, not blind hunger alone, and even the hardest decisions about elders and newborns were governed by custom, reserved only for true famine, and carried real emotional weight for the people who lived through making them. Ancient winter survival wasn't a horror story playing out at random. It was a system built by people trying to get their whole community to spring, sometimes at a cost that still makes modern audiences flinch when they hear it out loud. That's maybe the strangest part of this entire topic. We tend to picture prehistoric winters as pure chaos, people running from cold and hunger with no plan at all, making it up as they froze. The reality sitting underneath the archaeology is closer to a set of hard rules, agreed on by a group over generations, applied only when the alternative was everyone dying instead of some. It's uncomfortable to hear. It's also one of the clearest signs of how organized, how deliberate, and how painfully rational ancient human survival really was, long before anyone wrote a single word of it down. Spring always came eventually. The people who made it there carried the weight of every choice that got them through, and passed the same hardened rules on to the next generation, who would need them just as much when winter circled back around. There's no soundtrack for that kind of decision, and no easy lesson to wrap it up with. Just people, cold ground, thin stores, and a set of hard, careful rules built to keep as many of them alive as the season would ever allow.